Good morning, first graders. Happy Friday. Today we're going to learn more about clocks, but now we're going to learn a little bit more about half hour, or when the analog clock has the long hand at 30 minutes after the hour. So we're going to learn how to read clocks, but then we're going to read a little bit more in our Charlotte's Web story. So let's get started. Good morning, first graders. Today is Friday, May 8th, 2020. You will practice analog clocks with half-hour time. Have a fantastic Friday. Love, Mrs. Rochat. Yesterday was Thursday. Today is Friday. Tomorrow will be Saturday. The weather outside today will be cloudy and windy again, but I think it'll be warmer. We'll find out if my prediction is correct. Let's go ahead and read our money song. A penny is one, a nickel is 5, a dime is 10, and a quarter's 25. Remember, boys and girls, you can always find coins in your house, or if your parents have coins to give you, and you can practice counting different coins. And whenever you don't remember how much it's worth, sing the money song. So today we're going to learn about half hour. Now, the last time we talked about an analog clock, we talked about how the long hand tells us the minutes. And when the long hand is pointing to the 12, it means o'clock, which is 2 zeros. Do you see how I have blue numbers around the clock and blue numbers here? That stands for the minutes. On a clock, the minutes count up by fives. So every time there's a line and it's pointing to a number, that's 5 minutes. So it counts by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, which is half past, halfway through the clock, 30 minutes. 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and then it starts all over, which makes one whole hour of 60 minutes. So when you're writing the time, you still look at the shorthand. That gives you the hour. My shorthand is red and it's pointing to the 2, so it's 2, and then it's not at 0, 0. My long hand is pointing to the 6, which means 30 minutes. I could easily figure that out by counting by fives. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. If your clock didn't have these blue numbers, most of them don't. They just have the big numbers. You have to remember in your brain to count by fives to help you get to 30 minutes. So my clock says it is 2. I always look at my shorthand first and then my long hand next. So it says 2:30. And that's how we write it. We put the hour first and the minutes next. So in your math book that you'll get out, you'll turn to the correct page and we'll get started on practicing some more half-hour increments. Today we're going to learn how to read time to the half hour using our analog clock. So if you look here on the clock, we still have our shorthand, our longhand, we have our hour numbers, and our hour numbers actually help us read a clock to tell how many minutes. So we're going to learn a little bit about where the hands are pointing. If you look at that shorthand, it's in between 2 numbers. So look what happens. See what happens? It makes the hour hand, the shorthand, kind of in between the 10 and 11. So that makes the long hand go halfway around the clock. And when we do that, when it makes the long hand go halfway around the clock and it's pointing to the 6, that means 30 minutes past, whatever hour it is. And that makes the shorthand go in between the next hour. So it says 10:30. Another way to say 10:30 is to say half past 10. That means half of the clock is past that hour. So 10:30 or half past 10. An analog clock can show time to the half hour. A half hour is 30 minutes. Here's your helpful hint. The hour hand points between the 4 and the 5. The minute hand points to the 6. So it is 4:30, or it is half past 4. So you can trace over the number 4 and the time written as 4:30. Do that now. For these next problems, it says tell what time is shown and write the time. So all you have to do is write a number, boys and girls. Look at problem number 1. Half the clock is yellow, so that tells me it's half past what time? Look at your hour hand. Your hour hand is between the 9 and the 10. Remember, if it's halfway through, we go back to the number below. It should say half past 9. Go ahead and see what you would get for problems 2, 3, and 4 and write the numbers on the line. Okay, hope you wrote your answers. Problem 2 is half past 1. Problem 3 is half past 6. And problem 4 is half past 3. Double check your answers and fix them if you made a mistake. Your independent practice page tells you to write the time. So look at problems 5 through 12 and go ahead and figure out what the half past number is and write it on the line. 13. Jen's class is leaving for a field trip to the zoo at 10 o'clock. The class arrives at the zoo 30 minutes later. What time do they arrive at the zoo? Half past what number? 10 o'clock makes what time? 10:30. Nate's football practice ends at 4:30. Show this time on the clock. If practice lasts 1 hour, what time did it start? Write the time. Look at the clock and figure it out what time it is showing, and that will help you find your answer. Go ahead and do it now. Okay, in your own words, what is one difference between the minute hand and the hour hand? Here's your hint. Think about the size. All right, boys and girls, hope you were able to practice your half hour on an analog clock. We're going to read some of Charlotte's Web now. If you remember from yesterday, we're just at the fair and Charlotte was going to show Wilbur something, and we don't know what it is. They asked you to think about it because the chapter is called The Egg Sack. So I'm going to read you the story. Next morning, when the first light came into the sky and the sparrows stirred in the trees and the cows rattled their chains and the rooster crowed, the early automobiles went whispering along the road. And Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in a corner near the back of the pen. She was very quiet. Her 8 legs were spread wide. She seemed to have shrunk during the night. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a curious object. It was a sort of sack or cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked as though it were made of cotton candy. "Are you awake, Charlotte?" he said softly. "Yes," came the answer. "What is that nifty little thing? Did you make it?" "I did indeed," replied Charlotte in a weak voice. "Is it a plaything?" "Plaything? I should say not. It is my egg sack." "I don't know what that is," said Wilbur. "It means great work. The egg sack is my great work, the finest thing I've ever made." "What's inside it?" said Wilbur. "Eggs?" 514 of them," she said. 514? said Wilbur. "You're kidding." "No, I'm not. I counted them. I got started counting, so I kept on, just to keep my mind occupied." "It's a beautifully perfect egg sack," said Wilbur, feeling as happy as though he had constructed it himself. "Yeah, it is pretty," replied Charlotte, patting the sack with her 2 front legs. "Anyway, I can guarantee that it is strong. It's made out of the toughest material I have. It's also waterproof. The eggs are inside and will be warm and dry. If you look at the picture, you can see here's the egg sac, and there's little Charlotte. Charlotte, said Wilbur dreamingly, are you really going to have 514 children? If nothing happens, yes, she said, of course. Of course they won't show up until next spring. Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. What makes you sound so sad about it? I should think you'd be terribly happy about that. Oh, don't pay attention to me, said Charlotte. I just don't have much pep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children. What do you mean you won't ever see your children? Of course you will. We'll all see them. It's going to be simply wonderful next spring in the barn cellar with 514 baby spiders running around all over the place. And the geese will have a new set of gooselings, and the sheep will have their new lambs. Maybe, said Charlotte. However, I have a feeling I'm not going to see the results of last night's efforts. I don't really feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth. Wilbur didn't understand that word, languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was so worried he felt he had asked. What does that mean? It means I'm slowing up, feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur. But I don't want you to worry about me. This is your big day today. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the dew on it? Charlotte's web never looked more beautiful than it did that morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of early morning dew. The light from the east struck it and made it all plain and clear. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a steady stream of people would pass by, admiring it and reading it and looking at Wilbur and marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. Templeton. Slowly, Templeton dragged himself across the pen and threw himself down in the corner. I'm back! Whew! What a night! The rat was swollen to twice his normal size. His stomach was as big and round as a jelly jar. What a night, he repeated hoarsely. What a feast! A real gorge. I must have eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I ever seen such leavings, and everything was ripened and seasoned with the passage of time and the heat of the day. Oh, it was rich, my friends, rich. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, said Charlotte. It would serve you right if you had an acute attack of indigestion. Don't worry about my stomach, snarled Templeton. It can handle anything. And by the way, I've got some bad news. As I came past that pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle, I noticed a blue tag on the front of his pen, and that means he won first prize. I guess you're licked, Wilbur. You might as well relax. Nobody's going to hang on to you with no medal on ya. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Wait till he gets hankering for some fresh pork and smoked ham and crisp bacon. He'll take a knife to you. Be still, Templeton, said Charlotte. You're too stuffed and bloated to know what you're even saying. Don't pay attention to him, Wilbur. Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Templeton, said Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, you would have noticed that Charlotte has made an egg sac. She is going to become a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack. Is that true? Asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. Yes, it's true, said Charlotte. Congratulations! This has been a night, said Templeton. He closed his eyes, pulled some straw over himself, and dropped into a deep sleep. Wilbur and Charlotte were glad to get rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arable's truck rolled into the fair grounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen, and everybody climbed out. Look! Look at Charlotte's web! Look what it says! Cried Fern. The grown-ups and children joined hands and stood there studying the new sign. Humble, said Zuckerman. Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur? Humble. Everyone rejoiced to find that the miracle of the web had been repeated. Wilbur gazed lovingly into their faces. He looked very humble and very grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lurvy soon got busy. He poured a bucket of warm slops into the trough, and while Wilbur ate his breakfast, Lurvy scratched him gently with a smooth stick. "Wait a minute! Look at this!" cried Avery. He pointed to the blue tag at Uncle's pen. "This pig has won first prize already." The Zuckermans and the Arables stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. They stared at Uncle. Then they stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud, so loud, in fact, that the noise was heard by the stable boys over at the horse barn. Can I have some money?" asked Fern. "I want to go out to the midway." "You stay right here," said her mother. Tears came from Fern's eyes. "What's everybody crying about?" asked Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's just get busy. Edith, bring the buttermilk." Mrs. Zuckerman wiped her eyes with her handkerchief. She went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. "Bath time," said Zuckerman cheerfully. He and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery slowly poured the buttermilk on Wilbur's head and back, and as it trickled down to his sides and cheeks, Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed it into his hair and skin. Passersby stopped to watch, and pretty soon there was quite a crowd gathered. Then Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. "He isn't as big as that pig next door," said a person watching, "but he's definitely cleaner, and that's what I like." "So do I," said another man. "He is so humble, too," said a woman reading the sign. Everybody who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everyone admired the web, and of course nobody noticed Charlotte. Suddenly a voice was heard on the loudspeaker. "Attention, please," it said. "Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand? A special award will be made there in 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Crate your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly." How exciting. For a moment after this announcement, the Arables and the Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Avery picked up a handful of straw, threw it in the air, and gave a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like confetti into Fern's hair. Mr. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arable kissed Mrs. Arable. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everybody, and Fern hugged her mother. Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arable hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Whew, they're all so excited. Up overhead, in the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen, her front legs encircling her egg sac. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual, and she felt very weary and old, but she was sure at last that she had saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and content. "We have no time to lose," said Mr. Zuckerman. "Lurvy, help with the crate." "Can I have some money?" said Fern. "You just wait. Can't you see everybody's busy?" said Mrs. Arable. "Put the empty buttermilk jar into the truck," said Mr. Arable. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. "Does my hair look all right?" said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Oh, it looks fine," said Mr. Zuckerman, as he and Lurvy set the crate down in front of Wilbur. "You didn't even look at my hair," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "You're all right, Edith," said Mrs. Arable. "Just keep calm." Templeton, asleep in the straw, heard the commotion and woke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but when he saw that the men were shoving Wilbur into the crate, he made up his mind to go along. He watched his chance, and when no one was looking, he crept into the crate and buried himself into the straw at the bottom. "All ready, boys?" cried Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's go." He and Mr. Arable and Lurvy and Avery grabbed the crate and boosted it over the side of the pen and up into the truck. Fern jumped aboard and sat on top of the crate. She still had straw in her hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arable started the motor, and everyone climbed in, and off they drove to the judge's booth. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she were in the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. That's the end of the chapter. The next chapter will be called The Hour of Triumph. So you can kind of think about what that might be about. You can think about maybe what prize Wilbur's going to win at the booth. I miss you. I hope that you're enjoying this story and you have a great weekend. And I will see you again on Monday. Bye, friends.